The building they found could well have been a church or shrine once erected over the site, long before Constantine's mother came and declared another place to be where Christ's crucifixion had happened. They found several Roman coins, but none dated after the year 135, when Hadrian had finished what Titus had started in 70, squashing Bar Kokhba's rebellion, expelling all Jews from Jerusalem, and renaming Judea Palestina after the long-extinct Philistines. Team Wyatt found what appeared to be a stone slab altar positioned above the center cross hole. They also discovered a huge round stone disc, almost 2 feet thick and some 13 feet in diameter, which Ron speculated could have been the stone that was rolled against the entrance of the tomb of Yahshua, which was only a short walk from the dig. The groove in front of the tomb door, by the way, fits perfectly. If it was, it would have been over twice the size of the biggest seal stone they'd ever found. But then again, both Matthew and Mark described the stone as very large. The dig was now approaching its 3rd year. The team moved out beyond the bedrock platform with the cross receptacles and continued clearing rubble, meticulously sifting through tons of debris and cataloging numerous finds, such as Roman coins and 9-inch nails. They dug until they hit bedrock, that is, the lowest level to which the old quarry had been mined. A word of explanation is in order here. Old Jerusalem was built on a hill, Mount Moriah, surrounded by valleys on 3 sides, Kidron on the east, curving around to the south and meeting the valley of Hinnom, a.k.a. Gehenna, on the west. The Tyropoeon, or Cheesemaker Valley, runs up the middle. But on the north, Mount Moriah continues rising well above the city walls, making defense problematical. The solution was to quarry the limestone for the walls and buildings from near the summit of Moriah, forming a broad trench or dry moat across the north side of town, making what would have been a 10-foot-high wall into a 60-foot barrier. This also made moving the quarried stones to their intended building sites a downhill proposition. It was the original win-win scenario. At the bottom of their dig, Wyatt had reached an impasse. They knew that the Ark, if it were here at all, would have been hidden in a cave, though they hadn't encountered one as they dug down through the rubble. Wyatt's sons, Ronnie and Danny, suggested chiseling directly into the limestone quarry face, an arduous undertaking with slim probability of success. After all, they weren't even sure there was a cave, much less one here in this spot. But with no other options, Ron finally agreed. Their efforts were rewarded. Soon after they began tunneling into the rock face, they broke into an open space about 15 feet high and equally wide. They had discovered the first of a series of natural caverns within Mount Moriah. It took over a year to open and explore what turned out to be an extensive labyrinth of caves and tunnels beneath the mountain. With 1981 drawing to a close, all 3 researchers were showing the strains of their labors. Ron's sons were both sent home to the U.S. with severe pneumonia-like symptoms, while he continued excavating with the help of an intrepid and trustworthy local man they called James. Ron continued exploring the cave with James, climbing up a natural chimney into a tunnel so tight he had to exhale to get through. Breaking off a 16-inch stalactite that blocked a small hole leading to another cave, he peered inside. It appeared to be a large chamber filled to within 18 inches of the top with rocks, softball size and larger. Wyatt enlarged the hole with a hammer and chisel, enough for his slender assistant to slide himself in. The normally unflappable James didn't stay inside for long. Almost immediately, he scrambled back out of the hole, trembling and shouting, "What's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in there!" James insisted that he had seen nothing, but he was nevertheless consumed with terror, a terror so real that he beat a hasty retreat from the entire cave system and refused to go back in, ever. It was January 6th, 1982. Ron Wyatt was now all alone in a cave that had just given his trusted assistant a terminal case of the willies. He reflected that without James' uncharacteristic reaction, he would never have given the chamber a second glance. His flashlight beam caught something shiny beneath a pile of stones, and he started removing them one by one. It wasn't long before he encountered some wooden timbers, dry-rotted with age. Next he found animal skins, so old that they turned to powder when he touched them. Beneath the skins, Wyatt saw what few archaeologists had seen since the days of Howard Carter, the glint of gold. In the confined space, Ron examined what he could of the object, which wasn't much. The gold overlaid a wooden structure. It had a flat top and a raised molding down the side. A bell, a pomegranate, a bell, a pomegranate. The same pattern that had been prescribed for the robe of the high priest ephod in Exodus 28:33. Now, this obviously wasn't the Ark of the Covenant, but could it be the table of showbread, one of the other original pieces of furniture from the wilderness tabernacle? Ron's heart raced. Without removing the rocks, Wyatt couldn't be sure of what he was looking at. That would happen, of course, but on this day it was all he could manage to take a cursory survey of the situation. Sweeping his flashlight across the small gap between the rock pile and the top of the chamber, he noticed something else, not down among the rocks, but on the ceiling. There was a large crack in the limestone, reminiscent of the one he had first seen many months before, the crevasse that had intersected the square hole the Romans had chiseled into the bedrock for their cross to rest in. Although it was hard to keep your bearings in the twisting maze of tunnels, it seemed to Wyatt that the cavern he was in was somewhere directly beneath the crucifixion's site. This could well be the other end of that same earthquake crevasse. Slowly, painfully, the archaeologist crawled over the top of the rocks toward the rear of the chamber to get a better look at the crack. But when he got there, something else caught his eye. A large, flat stone, obviously man-tooled. It was broken in two pieces, the smaller of which had shifted slightly to one side. Though it was too close to the ceiling of the cavern to get a good look inside, it was immediately apparent to Wyatt what this was: the lid of the stone case that enclosed the Ark of the Covenant itself. He examined what he could from his cramped position, taking note of some black stains splashed onto it where it had split apart. And then he remembered the crack in the ceiling directly above it. Rolling over and shining his flashlight onto the crevasse, he noticed that its inner walls were coated with the same sort of blackish substance. Before returning to Israel, Wyatt had studied the Ark and its function for months. Basically, it was a wooden box, covered with gold rings at the corners. If it had to be moved, 4 priests used 2 poles placed through the rings. Attached to the box was a golden mercy seat, running its entire 4-foot length. It had a solid gold winged angel standing at each end, facing each other. The wings on the side facing the front of the ark rested at the angel's sides, and the wings toward the back reached out and touched each other, meeting in the center. The Torah had described it like this:
Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood. 2.5 cubits was its length, 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. He overlaid it with pure gold inside and out, and made a molding of gold all around it. And he cast for it 4 wings of gold, to be set in its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side, and 2 rings on the other side of it. And he made poles of acacia wood, and overlaid them with gold. And he put the poles into the rings at the side of the ark, to bear the ark. He also made the mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits was its length, and 1.5 cubits its width. And he made 2 cherubim of beaten gold, and he made them of one piece, at the two ends of the mercy seat, one cherub at one end on its side, and the other cherub at the other end on that side. He made the cherubim at the two ends of one piece with the mercy seat. The cherubim spread out their wings above, and covered the mercy seat with their wings. They faced one another. The faces of the cherubim were toward the mercy seat. Exodus 37, 1-9.
One day each year, the blood of the sacrifice was to be physically applied to a particular spot on the mercy seat by the high priest.
He, this would be Aaron, shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat on the east side, and before the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering, which is for the people. Bring its blood inside the veil. Do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the mercy seat before the mercy seat. So he shall make atonement for the set-apart place, because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel, and because of their transgressions, for all their sins. And so he shall do for the tabernacle of the meeting, which remains among them in the midst of their uncleanliness. Leviticus 16, 14-16.
Yahweh had provided this way for the sins of the people to be covered, albeit temporarily. The blood of bulls and goats couldn't atone for our sins perfectly, however. Perfect forgiveness would require a perfect sacrifice. Suddenly, Wyatt saw it all. The cave, the crucifixions, the crevasse. The dark stains could only be one thing: blood. And the crack? Had not the gospel writers recorded an earthquake? Yes, that's when the veil hiding the Holy of Holies had been ripped apart.
Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split. Matthew 27:51.
Not just any rocks had fractured, but the bedrock outcropping supporting the cross of Christ, the very rocks the gospel witnesses were so intently watching. The lid of the stone sarcophagus that had contained the Ark of the Covenant for over 600 years shattered, and the blood of Yahweh's perfect sacrifice had poured from Yahshua's wounds, flowed through the heart of the earth, and one final time had been sprinkled by the ultimate high priest upon the mercy seat. God had made his sacrifice. It was finished. If he hadn't already been lying on his back upon a bed of angular fist-sized stones with the ceiling of the chamber inches from his face, Ron Wyatt would have fallen to his knees. As it was, he merely fainted. Indiana Jones he was not. Wyatt was eventually able to explore the room and its contents more thoroughly. The chamber turned out to be 22 feet long and 12 feet wide at one end, narrowing somewhat at the other. It was obvious that the artifacts had not been brought in, nor could they be removed, the way he'd entered. Ron located the cavern's original entrance and found that it opened onto a passageway, a large tunnel that was blocked with stones in both directions. There had to be an underground passage leading off in the direction of the city, because that's where the artifacts had come from. When Jeremiah had moved the ark, Jerusalem was under a state of siege. Nobody was wandering around outside the walls. Later, using a colonoscope to look inside the stone case, Wyatt was able to see enough to convince him that this was indeed the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. He was also able to positively identify the table of showbread, the golden altar of incense, the golden censer, the 7-branched menorah, a large sword, and an ephod among a large collection of ancient Hebrew artifacts. He also verified that the earthquake crevice in the crosshole was the other end of the crack he saw in the ceiling of the chamber. By feeding a tape measure into the crack, he determined that the quake had split 20 feet of solid bedrock.